All right, boys, we're live. This is episode number 25, quarter century mark of the Deconstruction Podcast, brought to you by Jobtable, the simplest way to grow and manage your construction company. Boys, how we feeling today?
Feeling good, ready to rock.
How's it going?
Let's do this. Feeling amazing. Let's kick it off with a quick review here. This came in from Zach from Emmerich Construction. I posted this on Instagram the other day and wanted to share. So, with the help of Jobtable, I was able to schedule and get this job under contract before I even walked through the door. Thank you so much for that. They allowed me to have an open line of communication, make adjustments easily, and really have an open line of communication efficiently. Wouldn't use any other service. If I ever open up another business, I'll be maintained using Jobtable. I started out using code TCL6 from the Construction Life podcast. Shout out to Manny. Best decision I've made for my business. Check it out. Thank you, Zach. That's a great review, and we're happy you're seeing the value.
Thank you very
Shout
much.
out to Zach and shout out to Manny.
Much appreciated, guys. Thank you.
So we got a few really what I think are interesting topics for today. First one here, I'm going to kick it off. I'm going to share my screen again. This is a video that was sent to me also on Instagram, and I thought it'd be a great topic. So first, let me cue this up here and just play it. I'll turn the volume off. For those just listening, this is it's basically a video of this guy. He's like smashing glass, what looks like to be like in an office. So, you know, the caption is like this company wasn't paid. So now they're coming in and just smashing all the glass, like all the work they've done, I guess, because they weren't paid. So that's what this video is showing here. This guy just in a hammer, just like smashing this glass. So this opens up, the topic that we wanted to discuss today, the idea of basically, not getting paid for your work, right? So Charlie, kick it off with you. First of all, have you experienced any of this? Have you seen this on sites before?
I mean, not to that extent. I don't know how I really feel about that, to be honest with you. Like, I would really need to know the context and the whole story behind that situation, because it seems like it's very extreme. There are other channels you can go through, like, me and Johnny have dealt with this in the past, where somebody just kind of decides that they're not going to pay us and we lien the property. And, nowadays, most people building are not using their own money, right? So they're kind of relying on the banks to release funds as the project goes on. So as soon as there's any kind of lien on a project, those checks get frozen, right? Like they're not able to collect money anymore from the bank until that's cleared up. So, when we were kind of faced with a situation like that, obviously it does cost money. You have to get a lawyer involved. You have to go through the lien process. But Johnny, correct me if I'm wrong, I think once that was done, we were paid within a few days, right? All of a sudden, money just started magically appearing in their pockets and they were able to pay us, right? So, I mean, look, I'm 40 years old. You guys are a little bit younger, but I think I'm at a point in my life where I probably wouldn't be going back to a job and smashing glass with a hammer. It becomes a liability. If anybody comes in after and the rest of the glass that's there drops on their head, you could be liable. You could be sued. It seems very immature. Although, with that being said, I completely understand the anger and the frustration. Like, look, man, construction's a tough gig. We always put our best foot forward. We work our asses off, and the last thing we expect is to not be paid. It's really shitty. It's unprofessional. What I would say is, like I said, take the proper channels. Last thing you want to do is be arrested for anything, be held accountable for any kind of excessive damage. Now, with also too, what comes to mind is there was, when we first started, I think I actually told this story on this podcast earlier on, but I'll tell it very quickly. Is me and Johnny were on a project where this general contractor was a fly-by-night guy and he clearly didn't know what he was doing. And when we realized that we probably weren't going to get paid, I actually started just cutting out our piping and putting it back in our truck. And we had roughed in almost the entire place. He actually ended up calling the police, who came, but I was very, courteous and civil with them, and I just pretty much told them the situation. And they looked at him and they said, look, he hasn't been paid for it. This pipe is still his property, right? So again, we weren't going around, screaming at him and causing damage that was unnecessary, and being blatant, kind of like that video. But we did cut all of our materials out. We loaded it back in the truck respectfully, and we left. And the police had no issues with that. Again, this is like maybe like year 2 of our business. Right now we're in year 15. So I don't think we would do that now. Again, like I said, there's different avenues, but at the end of the day too, this day and age, it might just be a fake story too. It might just be a video of, that might have been old glass, not even in a new project, and they're just smashing it out, and they just kind of paint this picture that these guys didn't get paid, but who knows if it's even an accurate story. But assuming it is, definitely not the way to go about things. What do you think,
Johnny? What do you think? Is this ever justified, or?
Again, I share, Charlie's view in the sense of like you need the whole context of the story. But look, I said this many, many times that we are one of the only industries left where we put up all the money. Especially in commercial, industrial, you're only allowed to bill once a month. So you incur 30 days of costs, labor, material, equipment, whatever that may be. Suppliers want their money in 30 days. You submit an invoice and then you're waiting to be paid. Now, one thing I can say is that with that, there's always late payments. Like here in Ontario, they've changed legislation to prompt pay, which is you're supposed to be paid in 30 days from submitting an invoice, which rarely still ever happens, even though it's legislation. So for me, it kind of hits close to home when you see a video like that. I'm not saying it's right to do it. I'm not saying it's wrong. It all depends on what that contractor tried to do to get paid. But the reality is a lot of times when you're working for these massive corporations, it's David versus Goliath. And all you're trying to do is say like, man, like it's done. Like I need to be paid. And a lot of times they put you through these channels where all the consultants need to review it, or the engineers, or, they're trying to hold up hundreds of thousands. Sometimes I've even heard, of companies that are holding millions of dollars over, one button not working, or, one light flickering, right? So I always feel like it's the name of the game with these large corporations to try to keep as much money as they can for as long as they can before they have to pay it out. And sometimes it's wrong because they don't understand what the contractor's also going through, right? And the cost that they've incurred to get this project done for you, right? I do agree that there's a lot of channels, but sometimes, you don't know what that guy's gone through. And again, this is where the context really comes in. Maybe it was his first big job. He's going from a small contract to a very large contract. He's literally taking out every line of credit to make sure that, he can get this job done. And these people are just fucking him around. And maybe he has no money for lawyers, right? So I always say, like, no matter what industry you're in, you got to be fair, right? You go to a restaurant, you order a bottle of wine, you appetizers, this, that. You got to pay before you leave. You go to a mechanic, right? You get your car done. You're not taking your car off the hoist unless you've paid, right? In construction, we're putting up all the money. We're doing 30 days worth of work, invoicing it, and then waiting another 30 days. That's 60 days. And then when you don't get paid on that 30th day, and a lot of times you're calling the contractor to say, it's 35 days since I've, submitted my invoice and I still haven't been paid. And sometimes they look at you like you're bothering them, right? And it's like, wait a minute. My job was to provide the product or the service. Did I or did I not provide the product or the service? I did. So it's now time for you to pay, right? And again, getting back to that video, the context means a lot onto what pushed this guy or this company to go that far. But look, without sounding crazy, if somebody was trying to screw me out of hundreds of thousands of dollars, which, that glass that he broke there, it looks like, it was a decent sized job. If you know what glass costs nowadays, I don't fault the guy if the guy's getting fucked around by the client. But again, this is just on the surface looking in as a contractor, understanding that, I have a lot of friends in the industry that the same thing. I have a friend that told me that he got screwed by a contractor. He took the contractor to court, and as they're walking out of court and they have to come to a settlement, which means that he's losing money plus legal fees, the guy looks at him and he's like, oh, so, like I got this other project. And the guy looks at him like, are you fucking kidding me? You're asking me to do another project while we're walking out of court, because you try to fuck me, right? Like it's crazy. And people think that it's part of the business. Oh, it's part of the game. If you want to be in business, this is what happens. No, to me, that's bad business, right? You sign on the dotted line, right? It's my responsibility to get the project done. So if I fulfilled that, it's now your responsibility to pay me. It's a very simple process, right? So again, without knowing the whole context of that, the only thing I can tell you is, as a contractor, a lot of times getting paid late, I feel the guy's frustration. I don't know if I would go to that point. But again, I don't know if the guy has tried to take him to court, but maybe it's a massive company where they bury him with, a huge legal team where even when you're in the right, the way the legal system works, right? I always say the legal system is always in favor of who has the most money for the best lawyers, right? The only people that win in court are the people with the best lawyers, right? So,
But before that, John, like, I think that just reinforces what we talk about all the time. And that's the importance of knowing the people that you work with and building these relationships, right? And obviously that takes time to build, right? You're going to have some good ones, bad ones, you're going to weed them out. But I mean, finding the right general contractors to work with is so crucial, because this will be a non-issue if that's the case, right?
Well, let me ask you this, Charlie. Let me counter that.
People. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's use this as an example. Let's say that contractor in that video, he was introduced to either the client or the GC. And it's, let's say it's a step up from the projects like we've done, right? We've went from $1,000 projects up to multi-million-dollar projects. But, it's a gradual step, and you take these trusts, but a lot of times a new relationship. So let's say it was a new relationship. There was some trust there. The guy did the job, asked for the money, wasn't paid, was dicked around for, 4, 6, 8 months, a year. Try to go the legal way. Let's say he got buried in, because the other guy had a crazy team of lawyers. And let's just say you're out. You try to take that step and now you're out $250,000 because somebody fucked you over. Would you fault the guy for going in there and doing that?
No, I'm not saying that you'd be faulted. What I'm saying is you have to minimize the chance of that happening, right? The more people you work with that are good contractors and that are reputable and that are trustworthy, the less chance you have of that happening. But I think we all can agree that just being in construction in general, you're going to take that risk anytime you enter into any contract, even if it's somebody that's reputable and somebody that you trust. Anything can happen. They could go bankrupt and then you won't get paid, right? I'm sure they would do their best to try to get you every penny that they can. But at the end of the day, if they're going tits up, you're not going to get paid, right? So I think at the end of the day, the risk will always be there, right?
And I think this kind of reinforces what we've talked about a lot of times. Like, I don't know if it's all over the United States, but I know certainly in Florida, the way it works in Florida is if somebody's doing a project, and let's just say the project is $5 million, there's a lien that's automatically taken on that building or that piece of land, whatever it is. And that $5 million that, was quoted to build this building or, buildings or whatever it is, units, that has to go into a trust, right? Through lawyers. So what happens is there's a lien on the building for the $5 million, that money's in trust. And as contractors are invoicing, it's being pulled out of there. So, the money is actually there secured to pay for everybody's contract, right? We're here in Canada. We don't work like that. Right? Yeah. They send out drawing.
That's a great idea. And we should
Yeah.
have more things in place like that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the
Like
money, the
there's
way,
got to be, sorry, I just wanted to say there's got to be something to be able to protect both the client, right, and the contractor, right? It has to be a two-way road. If something is leaning way more towards one side or the other, let's face it, it's not fair, right? And that's where like the red flag should come up. If the contract is geared towards the client having all the benefits of the contract, I would say that's where the alarm should be sound. But at the same time, it should be legislation where it's an even, fair playing field. And that fair playing field is do the work, get paid, right? That's the way it should be. But here in Canada, I know especially in Ontario, because that's obviously where we function. You bid a project, you win it, they sign the contract. You have no idea where their funding is coming from, right? It's all just in good faith. It's all in just these legal documents that you're signing. Sure, they are contracts, but what's to say that the guy actually has $10 million to build his building? I don't know. I'm the plumber.
yeah, and
Right.
that's such a good point because, like we were saying before, a lot of like the large majority of these people building, you know, working on large projects are not using their own money. They're relying on outside funds, right? So now imagine like the example you said in Florida. Like let's say there was a law that passed where it's like you're required on a $10 million project, you're required to have 75% of the funds, right, in some kind of trust, right? People would feel a lot more comfortable, right? But now it kind of goes against this whole system that we've built where you can kind of free reign, just grab money from here, grab money from there. You can technically just use funds from anywhere you want, right? And again, that rug might be swept from under your feet, and those funds might not be there in a few months, right?
Yeah, like
Cost, I'm actually curious to know what you think, like from a non-construction guy, like the fact that like you can put up a building, let's say a project's $20 million, and these contractors have huge contracts with the generals, and the generals are just relying on the client who's relying on a bank. Does
Yeah.
that make sense to you?
So yeah, with this particular video, without getting repetitive with what you guys are saying, you first of all have to be very mindful of what you see online nowadays. But I'm just curious to hear, like, is this something you guys have actually seen or heard of in real life ever?
I know of one example. I wasn't physically there, but I know it did happen. There's without naming any names, there's a grocery store, a high-end one in the city, and they were building, one of their stores, and they paved an entire, the whole parking lot and everything, and then just to kind of turned around and decided to tell the contractor to go fuck himself. I'm not paying you, right? Not a penny.
Yeah.
So they came in the middle of the night with excavators, and they ripped up the entire parking lot and surrounding of the building. Every square inch that they had laid down got ripped up, right? And like Johnny said, like I said, I'm sure we can all relate to that frustration, right? It's bullshit. It shouldn't happen. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, now you're out even more money and more time, right, for doing that. So
Yeah. Like, yeah, with obviously without knowing the context, like let's assume they smashed the glass because of a non-payment. So like, let's say the invoice is like 1 day past due. They go and do this. Clearly that's wrong, way out of line. On the other hand, like, was this lingering for like months, years? Like, did they exhaust all the options? Did they go through the right channels? And then it came to this. So like the question I think about is, like, are these types of actions ever justified? And my initial reaction to this is to say no, because I just think it's always good to do things civilly and just avoid violence and destruction and all this stuff. But however, I do think in any situation there is a line that people have, and when that line gets crossed, it may be justifiable to perform an action like this. So again, it's one of those things that it's very circumstantial. You don't know the details, but overall, I do believe that there's certain lines that when crossed, there could be a reasonable justification for something like this.
yeah, and you would have to assume that if they went to that extent, they've probably have exhausted every resource and every attempt to collect the money, right? Be it the legal way, the right way, the moral way, however you want to say it. Like if you're going to go to that extent, and that's where I can kind of relate, where it's like, well, you know what? I'm not going to get paid. I know that now. So if I'm not going to get paid, you're not going to have glass, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, and again too, thinking about the size of the contract, what's to say the guy didn't take line of credit on his house, to get this done, and let's just say the company deliberately fucked them, right? So again, like you said, Costa, like we don't know the whole context of it, but there is that line, right? So if you feel like somebody deliberately fucked you and they literally destroyed your business and maybe even your livelihood because, they just thought that they were smarter than you, they outsmarted you or whatever, what would you do, right? At that point, if you got nothing to lose, it's like, fuck, I'll bring down the whole building. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying it's justified. We're not, asking for
yeah, we're not
violence.
condoning any of this
Yeah,
stuff for
yeah.
sure.
It's just I feel for the guy, right? Like truly, without knowing the context, if you push somebody to that limit, right? Something's got to be going on there where, the guy's probably begged and pleaded and, people are probably ignoring his phone calls. And I know a lot of contractors that are listening to us right now are probably resonating where it's like, yeah, I got a homeowner who did the same, or I got, a company that did the same to me. Like, look, obviously exhaust all the proper channels first. And obviously don't I would not condone doing that. But at a certain point, if somebody's crossed that line, who are we to say, that's wrong to do, right? What like two wrongs don't make a right. But if somebody's destroyed somebody's livelihood over a job, like you got nothing left, right?
Another thing that comes to mind too that I think is important, because I talk to guys like getting into commercial, and they call me and they complain that they did a job and it's been, like 20 days, 30 days, and they haven't been paid. And it just it makes me smile and laugh, because me and Johnny have contractors now that have owed us money for 120 days, sometimes 150 days. And you have to keep in mind that in commercial, it's very different than a residential setting where you do a job and you get paid the next day or the following week. You have to kind of go into it with
More
the
upfront.
mindset. Yeah, and you have to be somewhat established, and if you're not established, you have to have somewhat of a bank when you start doing commercial projects, and expect that a lot of these guys are going to pay when paid, and it may take 90 days. If you have a great relationship with them, you can kind of massage it and say, hey, look, I'm in a bind, like, I'm in a jam, I need some help, can I get paid sooner? Which are things that me and Johnny have done in the past when we were starting out. But I think there's this like misconception, and these guys kind of come in and they're blindsided, where they don't realize, like Johnny said before, they're floating all this money. So they take on this project. It's the biggest job they've ever had. It's $100,000, but they got to front like $30,000 right off the bat, right? There's no deposit on the job. So, they may be able to charge a mobilization fee, but for the most part, they're out, let's say 20, 30 grand. Now they need that money to for their payroll for the next few weeks coming, and they don't get paid. So they start to panic, right? And then they start, and it's like being a cornered animal, where it's like, but it's like, this is normal, right? This is a normal part of the business. It's unfortunate. And like I said, to the guys that owe us 150 days, sometimes those are the generals that they haven't been paid, and they say, look, I'm in a jam. I'm good for it. I've been working with you for 10, 15 years. If you guys absolutely need the cash, I can get it to you. I'll make it happen. But if not, if you don't mind, can you wait? And, most times we work with each other. It's a two-way relationship, which goes back to the importance of the trust with these generals.
Yeah. So I want to switch to the next topic. I was going to do this one last, but it relates to exactly what we're talking about, which is, so I'm going to pull up an article here. So this is, it's called Bill to Reduce Dollars Withheld from Construction Contractors Breezes Through Indiana Senate Committee. A House measure seeking to reduce financial strain on construction contractors made additional headway in the legislature Wednesday and now heads to the Senate floor. Key elements of House Bill 1033 would establish a uniform maximum amount of retainage for certain state and local public works projects. Retainage is the portion of payment withheld from a contractor or subcontractor until a construction project reaches substantial or full completion. So again, this is in Indiana. So under current state law, one retainage option requires no less than 6% and no more than 10% of an agreed upon contract price for a public works project to be withheld until the work is halfway done. A second option is in code, permits no less than 3% and no more than 5% of the contract price to be retained from final payment until work is substantially complete. So just one more part here. The latest version of the bill, authored by Jim Pressel, would eliminate the minimum retainage requirement for publicly funded projects and lower the maximum withholding percentages by 4% for both retainage options. So from 10% to 6% of completed work until the project is half done, and then from 5 to 3%. So I know this is very relevant to you guys specifically, to any company that really does commercial work at all. They retainage. I know here in Canada, we use like holdback, which I think is interchangeable terms. So
this one got me fired up, man. When I saw you sent this yesterday, it was like music to my ears. Like seeing that bill, it's a step in the right direction.
I'll give you my quick interpretation of this and my thought, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. So, when I went through this article, first of all, I like the idea of leveling out the playing field and just giving back more control to the small and medium-sized businesses and sub-trades. I understand why, obviously, a GC would hold back like 10% or whatever the percentage is. I do think that's reasonable from the perspective of the GC, of course. But do I think that should be a law? That's where I'm not sure. For me, a core principle is free market capitalism. And I think the market naturally does a very great job of weeding out bad businesses and bad management and bad practices. If a sub-trade, for example, refuses to hold back 10% of their billables, then that should be their right. And guess what? If enough of the top, most reliable sub-trades do the same, then that holdback amount will naturally reduce or disappear completely. And that's just an example, simplified example of how a free market could play out. So I don't know, Johnny, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I was waiting. Okay, so the reality is on larger contracts, people think, oh, it's a $5 million contract, right? The bigger the contract, the less the margin, right? A lot of these people, especially in the bigger cities where, there's a lot of competition, the margins are very slim, right? So, on larger projects, people are working, between 8 and 12%, right? So this is, tying back to what we were talking about before, and now it is very relevant because, look, let's say you have a $100,000 project, okay? Your margin's 10%, so you're gonna make 10 grand on $100,000. You start the project, there's absolutely no deposit. This is commercial, industrial, civil, right? This is the way it works. So what happens is a lot of these projects you're allowed to bill once a month. So you send in your first draw, right? So you've done a month worth of work, you send in the invoice, okay? You send in the invoice, you got to take off 10%, okay? So you've incurred those costs, you're paying those costs, now you're waiting to get paid. So now typically it takes 30, 45, 60 days. Well, guess what? In another 30 days, you got another invoice, right? So here's another invoice, right? And then so on and so forth. So let's say you're billing 10% throughout the whole project over 10 months. Okay. Every time you're getting paid, you have another bill that's already in the pipeline, waiting to get paid. So you're fronting the project the whole time. Then at the end of the project, there's a 10% holdback. Now, 10% holdback, the way it works is it's not the GC that's holding it. It's in the contract because that protects the client to ensure that everything is not only installed, but installed, passed inspection, commissioned, and working properly, right? So what happens is, let's say as a plumber, let's say we're done the building, okay? But now let's say whoever the GC or the client is, they selected the electrician. And let's say the electrician didn't put the emergency signs up, and the emergency signs, something happened and there's a 6-month lead time. They cannot get occupancy for the building, which means if you cannot get occupancy for the building, you cannot release holdback. So we've been on projects, right? Like we're on one right now and it's owned by the city that we've been waiting a year and a half for our 10%
and just to put that into context. Sorry, John, just to put that into context, we haven't been on site for a year and a half. Okay.
Which
so
means
we completed our job. Our inspections are done. Engineers have signed off on all of our work. We're completely done. But because the general contractor is not done their scope and there's a lot of work left to do that has nothing to do with plumbing, electrical, just, some more framing, whatever it is, but it's part of that original big project, they're not done. Therefore, we cannot invoice the holdback.
Yeah. And so we're a year and a half. We haven't been paid for this holdback, right? And truthfully, we made 10% on that project. It was a larger project, which means that we fronted the money. We were never paid on time, right? It was always 60, 65 days, sometimes 70 days, sometimes, maybe 47 days. And it's a year and a half, which means that we fronted the project. We did the project. Sure, we're going to get paid, right? It is government. But at the same time, we did a year-long project. We can't submit holdback. It's been a year and a half, which means that our profits from that job, we still have not seen them, right?
And then you think about how the money gets devalued, right? So now when you get that money, it's not even worth what it was a year and a half ago.
Yeah. So what happens is like, I do agree that there has to be something. Like, this is where we say you have to level out the playing field. And unfortunately, like Costa, I agree with you. Free market will speak. But the problem is that I do believe you need an outside force, be it legislation, that steps in and says, hey guys, so nobody comes here and, strangles each other. Look, to protect the client, this is what it is, but also to protect the contractor, this is what it is, right? And you need to follow these guidelines to ensure that, companies are not going belly up, you know what I mean? Left, right, and center, and clients are not getting screwed left, right, and center, right? So, I'm glad. What was that? Indiana? Did you say?
Yeah, Indiana.
Yeah, I'm glad that they're doing that they're bringing down the holdback, because the reality is the bigger the project, the less the margin. And if it's constantly on a 10%, that means what happens to the guy that really needed the work and he went in at 8% margin, right? That means 2% of that project, that what it physically cost him, right? He's waiting for, plus whatever his profit is on the job, right?
So check this out. I was just, sorry, John, but it's related to what you're saying. I just quickly searched this here. So just the average profit margin for a commercial sub-trade. I don't know how accurate these are. You guys probably have a better idea, but between like 5 to 15% is what it's saying here. It breaks it down by trade. My guess is it's probably on, even like, especially nowadays with what's going on, it probably on like the lower end of this, right?
Well, the numbers, those numbers for electrical, plumbing, and HVAC, I would say would reflect larger commercial and mid-rise, high-rise projects or big civil projects. When you're talking about smaller project like $50,000 to $500,000, then you'll probably see profits of 15 to 20, 25 sometimes.
Yeah, but we're talking like commercial now, right?
Yeah, I would say the average is 8 to 12%. That to me seems like the most normal profit margin. And the reason I say that is because on these larger projects, it's a tendered project. So what happens is, if you're a guy that's going in at 25, 30%, well, guess what? Us as a plumbing company, there's 5 other plumbing companies, and it basically comes down to whoever needs the work or whoever's hungry for that job, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's how it goes. So if you're holding 10% and you're working on an 8% or a 9% margin, right? Think about that for a second, right? If one of the trades fucks up, right, or the GC fucks up, or the client has a change, or something happens with their financing that does not allow the project to continue on for a little bit or whatever it may be, then you're not able to build that holdback, which means that I just did this whole project for free. You know what I mean? And it's wrong.
Like, think about the sub trades that start first, right? Like, I don't know, the excavators, the concrete, the foundation. Like, these guys, they come in, they're done, right? Like, they're done their portion of the project. Like, technically, it's like, should they be paid 100% of the job? Probably.
Yeah.
But now, with these tight margins, these guys now, let's say they have multiple jobs going on, they're waiting for like 10, 20, 30, whatever, how many tens of thousands of dollars to get paid, which is probably their profit. But now they have multiple of these jobs going on. Like, when are they going to get paid their profit?
So this is why the holdback pisses me off so much, and it really doesn't make any sense. And like I said, like that bill, it definitely looks like a step in the right direction. But this is my thought on it. When a general contractor enters in a contract with the client, we technically don't have anything to do with their contract, right? Like we are contracted, our contract is with the general, okay? And then their deal is with the client. So as far as I'm concerned, when I complete my job in full, 100%, my inspections are completed. So there's a record of it with the city. Their engineers that are part of the team that created the drawings with the architects and everything, they come to site. They also sign off on all of our work. As far as I'm concerned, we're completed. We've passed inspections. We're done 100%. I'm not binded to your contract with your client. Why am I left holding the bag? The general contractor should be left holding the bag. I should be paid in full. And if he's got to have some kind of holdback, right, towards the client, that's on him. That's his deal with the client. We're done, right? But everything, shit flows downhill. That's how it's always been, right? Just like that's why you see drawings are getting worse and worse. And where you should have all the information on an architectural drawing or on a mechanical drawing, it'll always say site verify, contractor to site verify. It's right. They tried to do as little as they can and put it down on us, and right, and we're left holding the bag and dealing with the shit. So unless you have some kind of legislation and people band together, you're not going to see any change. Why would they change? If we're putting up with it and we're doing it, why would they?
Look, to sum it all up, truthfully, I think this is the way it's got to work. You have to protect the client, right? I don't I don't agree with Charlie there where, it's up to the GC, because a lot of times the GC and the subs, like, we should be a team, right? We're the team that's to provide whatever it is on the drawings and build whatever, the client needs built. So reality is, this is the way I believe it should work. So you have your contracts in place, right? After every inspection and every sign off from your consultants and engineers, the draw should be approved, right? And you should be paid promptly, right? Now, there should be a percentage at the end that is held back, right? So call it a holdback. You should have some type of holdback. 10%, I think it's too much, but you should have a holdback that's right into the end. So if I pass my final inspection and your engineers sign off, which they should have an obligation once inspections passed, within 7 days, they are obligated to go to site and sign off. Once they sign off, right? Okay, give a window of, 15, 20 days to the client to say, look, here's, 3% holdback. Let's just say there's a 3% holdback. They've passed final inspection. Everything's operating. The engineers have signed off. Come to site, make a list of anything that you think needs to be corrected. Turn on faucets, turn on lights. Look at the AC. Was the place painted properly? Is the drywall good? Or
they do that. Those are the deficiency lists, right? And that's what I'm saying. Once you fix all your deficiencies, the engineers, they'll sign off on it. Then you're done. Right?
And that's when I believe holdback should be released. It should not have to do with occupancy, because right now, that project that we're talking about, it's beyond even our GC's control. the GC was forced to use an elevator contractor, and the elevator contractor, they couldn't get some parts, something happened, and it's been a year and a half. It's not the GC's fault. It's not any of the trades' fault. It's not the design team's fault. It's nobody's fault. But essentially, it might not even be the elevator company's fault. But because of this one part on the elevator, they're not able to get occupancy. So guess what?
What would make sense, John and Costa, would be to do your holdback by the trade, right? That way you're not handcuffed. I'm not worried about what the elevator guy can and can't get if the project is delayed. If my scope of work is done, my holdback can be released, right? If you separate it, to me, that would make the most sense. And obviously, I think 10% is high.
Yeah.
Right.
To me, I think like you said, I think every sub trade should have the right to negotiate their own terms. Let's use like a very hypothetical situation, right? Let's say you're working for a very prominent GC. They always hire the best sub trades, but like by law, there has to be this 10% holdback. So that's why I don't like the idea of like legislation and all this stuff. Like I think free market works the best. So in that scenario, let's say that GC who only works with the best, like now all the sub trades on this project, they're like, no, I don't agree to 10%. I'll do 2%. Like, what's that contractor going to do? They're going to like hire other contractors now who they don't.
Reality is, yeah.
That's but like, what's going to happen then? That project is probably going to go to shit. And that's the beauty of the free market. It will naturally correct itself. They're going to learn from that mistake. And now they're going to end up, you know what? We're going to do 2%.
Well, think about it.
It'll recalibrate itself.
I know, but think about it. On these larger projects, like I said, there's a tendering process. I can't tell you how many times we've been beaten on a project with people we've worked with, many times. And the reason that we're not on the project is because some company that not even the GC knows came in with this number that it's like, I have to present this to the client, right? Your number is at $1 million, and these guys are saying they could do the same job for $850,000, right? Even to a point where, sometimes when we get that feedback, it's like, how can they do it for that much, right? Like it's impossible, right? So the reality is sometimes, and we've been in these situations too, where we've won a project and they'll put a contract in front of us. And there's very standard contracts like CCDCs and, CCA contracts that are like, they are legislation, but a lot of times, whether it's the client or the GC or the developer, they're putting their own clauses in there, and we'll sit there and read them and we'll be like, yeah, we don't adhere to this. You guys put this in, we're not adhering to this, or we're not adhering to that. And, their head office will call us and be like, well, look, this is our company policy. And if you don't want to accept this, then we're going to have to go with the next contractor that will accept this. And sometimes it sucks because it's like, well, man, you're basically telling me to take the project and the payment terms are paid when paid. So if I sign on this dotted line and the client decides to screw you over, like obviously, again, we're a team, but how do I know that, you're taking the proper steps to go and lean the project in due time, right? Because here in Ontario, you have to lean a project. If I'm not mistaken, Charlie, I think it's with you have to be on site and you can only lean within 45 days. From the last time you're on site.
Yeah, from the last day you're on site. I don't remember exactly. 45 or 90 days, but.
Yeah, 45 days or whatever. So a lot of times we never get paid in 45 days because we trust the people we're working for, right? We trust that their clients are good people, right? So you're putting a lot of trust. And unfortunately, this is the way that the industry works. But at the same time, they can easily turn around and be like, I'm not paying you. And guess what? You can't lien me. And then getting back to that video, is that what happened to the guy in the video where he's like, okay, fuck this. If you're not going to pay me for the glass and I'm getting screwed out of the glass, nobody's going to enjoy this glass. You know what I mean?
And Costa, the whole free market idea, we've been dealing with this 10% holdback for years. So why do you think the free market hasn't fought against it? And just kind of, right, it's because we don't feel like we have that power, and it's just the way the system is, and it's normal to everybody, right?
And I
But
feel,
I just don't see a world where people can band together and fight this, right? You're always gonna have those people that are willing to do it just to take on the job, right? It's like, hey, these guys want 2%, fuck these guys. These guys over here, they're willing to do it. They've always done it. They don't care, so we're gonna go with them, right?
and sorry, just to add one key note that I think none of us mentioned. A lot of this holdback, like Charlie said, a lot of these people that are building these projects, they're funded, right? They're either funded by private equity, they're funded by banks, and that's what the bank requires. So, that's why it's into legislation, right? Because the bank will not release more funds or allow you to proceed if they don't see some type of security, right? And unfortunately, that security is, and I don't know why this whole industry has turned to, contractors are the shiesty ones. They're the ones that are making all this money. We need to protect ourselves from the contractors. I like, truthfully, I don't know when that came to be, but in order to get rid of that 10% holdback, that would have to go back to the banks, right? And be like, listen, you want to fund this person for $20 million, right? You're getting 2% as like a guarantee. You know what I mean?
yeah, they have all the leverage. Obviously, like you said, they're funded. They have the investment, but the sub trades aren't. Like they're the ones who are getting fucked at the end, right? But yeah, this bill, I like this because it seems like a very positive precedent at the minimum.
For the
And
industry, it is. It definitely is.
yeah, for sure. So, anyways, that was a good one. Move on to the next topic here.
Let's go.
All right. So, switching gears a little bit now. So, okay, there's a lot of tariff wars and economic uncertainty and things going on right now. And I know we've all seen it on Instagram and a lot of companies kind of promoting themselves and marketing themselves as made in Canada, built in Canada, kind of headlines like that. So just in general, Charlie, I guess start off with you. What are your thoughts on a company that kind of positions themselves and markets themselves as this made in Canada, built in Canada? Is it a good idea, a bad idea?
I think it's a big mistake. I mean, look, it's no secret to you guys. You guys know how I feel about politics. I think it's just divide, and you're just dividing the people. And why would you label your company as for Canadians only, made by Canadians for Canadians, and now you're just cutting off a huge market in the United States? I mean, logically, as a business owner, that's the last thing I would want to do, right? Especially being one of the founders of Jobtable, where we have a huge market in the United States. Why would we brand ourselves in that way, right? And also too, again, to the dividing point, there's a lot more to the story. People have their feelings about Donald Trump, and I'm not an advocate for him by any means, but he's not just this big bad guy who's implementing all these tariffs. It's a two-way street, right? This goes both ways. We've done things to them as well. So I hate how people kind of jump to conclusions, and they get the pitchforks and the torches, and they want blood. At the end of the day, what we should be doing is inviting conversations and talk and resolutions, not this more divisive tactics where it's I'm going to cut off a huge part of the market because I'm mad at you guys because of my feelings, right? And I'm pissed off. So, what do you think?
So my first reaction when I see companies doing this is to cringe, to be honest. To me, this is nothing more than a company that is virtue signaling. They're publicly expressing an opinion just to gain approval from people because that's what they think is the popular sentiment in society, right? That's what they're doing. And so with that being said, though, I think the only way I could see this making some sense, if I'm just looking from the other perspective, is if you're a company who exclusively sells and markets into Canada, and that's it, then a very niche, then I think, okay, that becomes more genuine when you're you saying these statements. But what I'm talking about are more like software companies like Jobtable, particularly in our space. And that's where I saw like a few of these come out, and obviously not going to name names, but for a software company or any company who sells globally or across North America, I think this is not only virtue signaling, but it's a major sign of weakness, right? Like just focusing on the fact that you're made in Canada is to me, it's compensating for a lack of something else, like a competitive edge, or like your product. You're not confident in your product. So I don't like it, especially for software companies that sell into the US and in Canada. I think that's alienating your US clientele. It adds to this like us versus them division. I think it's political pandering. I think it's a sign of weakness. And yeah, if you're a software company and who thinks this is making you look like righteous and moral, like, I think you should reconsider how you're positioning. That's what I think.
I couldn't agree more. I think the same thing, truthfully. It's look, man, people want to admit it, not admit it. They're our big brother. And on both sides of the aisle, look, everybody wants their country to prosper. And obviously anybody, like, let's just say, how a lot of people view this, attacking their country, they're going to stand up and, be patriotic. But the reality is once this all goes away, are you going to still stand on that? You know what I mean? We're proud to be Canadian. Our software was obviously built and it's operated in Canada, but we, have a huge clientele in the United States. We love American people. We love their products. I know they love our products. So to sit here and, like, Charlie said, to take out your pitchfork and, go and try to, like, get blood, it makes no sense. Like, stop feeding into this shit. We got to invite conversation. There's obviously something going on here where I feel like even our people that are running for prime minister here, I think Mark Carney said, the relationship we had with the US in the past is over. It's like, that should be the biggest sign to be like, what are you saying? Like, this is not, you're not speaking for the people. Like, we need the US, right? US needs us. We are the Western world. Like, aren't we supposed to be that, that the side to look at for the rest of the world, to be like, look at what they're doing over there. Look, they get along great. They have free trade. They do this, they do that. No, like, we're falling in line with all the wrong things here. And again, like we've been saying, conversation fixes everything, right? So to sit there and give into this division, I don't like it. And companies that are coming out and basically saying that, I'd love to see them, when this is all resolved, be like, okay, well, now just sell to Canadian companies, or just sell, to American companies, right? Let's see how that goes now, right? Now stand on what you've said, right? And
No, but
this
like
is
Costa
where,
said, these companies they're just going with whatever the news cycle is, right? So it's like,
and it's horseshit. Like personally, like you said, Costa, I cringe by it. Listen, everybody has their own political views, religious views. Everybody's entitled to it. But, as a corporation, as a company, to put it out there like that, I strongly disagree. And, I'm pretty sure some people listening are going to think, we're wrong, and people that are listening are going to think we're right. But in the end of it, it's like, look, man, if we sell globally, how can you, basically say we just want Canadian market or American market? Because then when this opens up, you need to stand on it, man.
yeah, and the same people that are saying this are also getting on a plane and vacationing in Florida. So, I mean, you have to take it with a grain of salt.
So safe to say, you guys will not be putting like a "Made in Canada" a banner
No,
on the iCloud
we
website.
love our American brothers and sisters forever. we're forever united at Jobtable.
Yeah, for real.
Let it be known.
That's how we're gonna brand ourselves.
Yeah, everyone's welcome.
Yeah, no borders here. All right. Anything else, guys?
No, this
Or
is a
should
good
we
one.
wrap?
It's a good
This
one.
is
Yeah.
very
If
good.
anybody, you know what? Like, I'd love to hear some comments from anybody listening. You know, on these three topics. Any views, you know, like, are we right? Are we wrong? Like, we love this interaction. This is what we do this for, you know, so that we can get this content out there, and a lot of stuff that we speak about on site or, you know, with friends and colleagues. We'd love to hear like everybody else's view, because again, we're three guys just trying to keep it raw. So I'd love to hear what, you know, our audience has to say as well. So please, guys, chime in, you know, send us DMs, you know, leave a
Especially
comment.
especially if anybody wants to start this coalition to end the 10% holdback once and for all. Hit us up and we'll make something
Yeah,
happen.
yeah, for real. Let's get a petition going.
Nice. Well, and yeah, last thing I'll say, if anyone listening, if you have some time, leave a review on Apple, Spotify. It'll help this reach more and more people. Yeah, because we're not going anywhere. We're 25 episodes in, and we'll be going well into the hundreds, I'm sure. So we appreciate the support. And that's it. Let's wrap there, guys. Pleasure as always, and we'll talk next week.
All
Ciao,
right.
guys.
Take
Bye.
care.